Matthew Phelps, co-author of the Turning to God's Word Bible study, You Shall Have No Other Gods, the book of Exodus. Today we'll be talking about lesson 5 of our study, which covers the book of Exodus, chapter 5. In this lesson, we get a bit of kind of a textbook view of oppression and how it operates. And also like a very predictable thing, right? Both from a human point of view and God has more or less predicted this. We know when Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh that he's going to say no, which is what happens. What God didn't necessarily forewarn them about was what that no looks like or the steps involved in getting it to a yes, right? They have the broad strokes of the plan. Yeah, he's going to say no, I'm going to show my mighty power, and he's going to let you go and give you a bunch of stuff. We don't know from what God has warned them about that Pharaoh doesn't just say no. He says no, and if you all are being uppity enough to ask this, then we need to do something to double down on the oppression. And we don't know the details of God's response. So in this lesson, we get to that first round of asking Pharaoh saying no, and then we get to what he chooses to do about that, and Moses' response. We're still in the middle of, or at the beginning of, a conversion experience for Moses here, right? He's met God. He's begrudgingly agreed, I guess. You know, here are my three best excuses, God, for why this is a bad idea. And, you know, they worked that out. And then he got his house in order enough to not be murdered along the way. And he showed up. Like he's doing, right? They're working through the resistance that is still Moses and getting to the ascent that is faith and that is service of God. But it's for even people having a very rapid conversion experience, that's still necessary, right? You still have to work through the garbage that you have in the way of serving God, your own issues, your own baggage. Moses had a lot of insecurity issues, which he's working through here, and just so much uncertainty around dealing with the Egyptians, and whether he'll be accepted by the Israelites. So when, you know, he goes to the Israelites and says, hey, yeah, we're going to make this happen and Pharaoh's going to let you go, and then he doesn't, Moses, some of that uncertainty that has been core for who Moses is kind of wells up a little bit, and he has to work through, you know, which thing is real here. Is it God that I'm trying to serve, or is it, you know, all of this baggage from my past and my own feelings about all of this that's coming up, and, you know, how do I reconcile these two things? So I'd say the most interesting part of this lesson is definitely it comes at the end when Moses tries to work through some of that. Along the way, we do see how oppression works more or less at all times and in all ages. None of this should be surprising. It doesn't really take a super deep dive to figure out that if the people look like the Israelites look like they're inclined to offer any kind of resistance, Pharaoh is going to do everything he can to try to crush that. So that's where we're at, is asking Pharaoh's response, and Moses working through what happens. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh. We don't see who's talking here, but we know it's Aaron. God says, let my people go, that they may hold a feast in the wilderness. That's going to be their line for several chapters, right? If you've seen the movie, or, you know, that's the thing they're going for, right? Let my people go. That's going to be the line for a long time, is Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go, and events happen. So here's one of those. In this case, the events that happen are Pharaoh saying, Who is the Lord that I should heed his voice and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. No, those are two separate points, right? Like, even if he knew the Lord, the second point still holds. Moreover, I will not let Israel go. But, like, the first point also is there, like, why do I care about you all serving the Lord, right? It is not my God, I don't know him. And even when they had a good situation in Egypt, thanks to Joseph, that Pharaoh never knew the Lord, right? He knew Joseph. And on account of Joseph, he was willing to treat the Israelites very well. But there is no Joseph or that Pharaoh. They're long dead. So the problem when you're dealing with things in spans of hundreds of years, as we've seen in some of these other cases with, for example, God being the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, is mortal people die. And anything that was relationally established with people who dies with them. And even the memory of that can fade. The same thing that's affecting Pharaoh's relationship with these people is also affecting the Israelites' relationship with God, as we've seen a little bit, and we'll see a lot more. But yeah, Pharaoh doesn't know God, and he doesn't want to either. He wants... No, we have changed pharaohs, right? The one who started this program of oppression and possibly assimilation is also dead. It's less clear that this pharaoh has interest in the assimilation part. He seems a lot more interested in the slave labor part and the free workforce. We can unpack that more as we go, but he really seems to be enjoying having a low-cost slave workforce, helping to carry out massive construction projects in Egypt. And he hasn't said it, and he will say it actually. That seems to be his interest, is like, well, yeah, why would I do that? Like, okay, request noted. You've given me no reason why I, Pharaoh, should care about doing that thing. What's in it for me? And Moses and Aaron have not very well answered the question, Pharaoh, here's what's in it for you, right? And that's kind of his point. It's a very poor negotiation when you go to someone who has all the power and say, here's the thing I want you to do, and there's nothing in it for you. Like, God predicted this wouldn't go well. Like, Moses and Aaron also didn't really think this would go well. It's not going well. Right now, Moses and Aaron have absolutely no leverage. Before the answer can change, they have to have leverage, which is the thing that God is going to get to work on. But for now, this is going the way that it goes without God intervening, right? They're probably lucky to leave unbeaten and alive, in all honesty. But, so, Pharaoh, predictably, nope, not doing that. This almost, and it wouldn't be totally surprising, feels like they're reading from a script, right? Like, super nervous, Moses and Aaron somehow get an audience with Pharaoh, trying to figure out what to say. Like, maybe Moses already wrote down, Aaron, here, let my people go. And then, like, he's still reading the next lines. Pharaoh says, yeah, totally not doing that. And then he says, the God of the Hebrews is, like, right? Like, this is, like, disregarding the fact that Pharaoh just said, totally not doing that, with, you know, their God has met with us. We need to go, you know, or the Lord our God will fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword, us being the Hebrews, right? Again, where is the leverage, right? Like, and Pharaoh is saying, well, that would be interesting. Yeah, I'd like to see that. Yeah, good luck with that. But, you know, you're sticking around here, so good luck with that. But it really reads kind of like they don't have very much bearing or confidence in what they're approaching with, right? This is like the thing they intended to say, and it's still all about how their situation affects them and not how it benefits Pharaoh. which is worth noting because the dynamic of who talks to Pharaoh and how these conversations go will change. As Moses develops some of that confidence, and Aaron kind of falls out of the picture, their negotiating gets a lot stronger as well. Not only because God gives them leverage, although that definitely helps, but Moses also gets a lot better at using what they have and presenting things. Like, Moses is way better at this than Aaron, despite the fact that he said the opposite. Like, he is much better at this than Aaron is. But we're not there yet. For now, I bring that up because it's worth noting this is badly executed, right? And that's not an accident that this is badly executed. There's no way that they're winning, so it doesn't matter, right? The most eloquent speaker of all time isn't getting Pharaoh to let them go here. It's just not happening, but it is still useful to note that this is badly executed so that we can watch for when it's not. So Pharaoh's not beating around the bush at all, right? Here's where he says, that idea is great and all, but in the time that they're in the wilderness worshiping God, they're not working. What do we do about that? Like, there are all these people doing all of this work, and you would take them away and the work wouldn't get done. Like, what's your solution to that? That's, for me, Pharaoh, that is the concern here, is you would propose something that would involve all of these people not working. With the subtext of, you can't let the slaves set their own agenda. How are they still slaves if they can decide to go do something that they want to? That might give them ideas and cause them to get uppity. Like the fact that you're even here asking Moses is indication that you all are getting kind of uppity. Get to your burdens, right? Like, you're Hebrews, right? Why aren't you guys slaving right now? You two should go do that too. And definitely get away from here with this nonsense about not working. Get to work. Here is Pharaoh's oppressive response. You all, if you have time to come talk to me about worshiping your God, clearly have too much time on your hands. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to make you busier, arbitrarily busier, right? The great manifestation of oppression, right? We're going to give you more work to do and unrealistic expectations. The really important point here is Pharaoh doesn't care if the amount of work falls off in what he's doing, right? Like, he's not doing this because he has, he was reading a book on efficiency in the workplace and he suddenly realized we could make this so much more efficient if they got their own straw. Like, that is the opposite of efficient, right? Which he knows and doesn't care. What he's doing is imposing an arbitrary, pointless burden as a means of, it's not pointless, but it's only used as a weapon against the Israelites. It has nothing to do with brick output. And in fact, brick output is definitely going to go down doing this, and he's okay with short-term doing that until everybody gets in line, right? So he's going to give them more unreasonable work, keep the expectation for output the same, impose penalties when that falls off. There will be internal grumbling, certainly, among the people just about their situation, and they will be busier, more of them will be beaten, all of that. But ultimately, who are they going to direct their dissatisfaction toward? Everything, it will make the previous way they had it seem, and this mentality sticks with them for a long time, maybe we didn't have it so bad after all, right? Because it could have been like this, and this is worse. So that really, it wasn't that bad. And then uppity Moses and Aaron came along and said, that they could, they could get us something better, and all they did is make it worse. So why should we? And this is why you don't listen to revolutionaries, right? Is because they could make things worse. And just maybe not the status quo is, it's been working. So like, that's what Pharaoh is going for, right? He's going for stirring up discontent that gets directed toward Moses and Aaron, and tries to get the people themselves to be the ones who aggressively seek to do away with ideas of revolt and revolution. This works, right? Tyrants do this because this works. And it comes very close to working here. If this had been a human revolt, it would have worked here. Without God involved, it would have worked perfectly right here as well. This is a very solid play on Pharaoh's part. There is one other thing that this does as well, which is almost certainly also a thing Pharaoh had in mind, which is it scatters the people around, right? They're all not working together in one place all day where they can be talking about revolution at the same time. Everybody has to go all over the place throughout the day, and so they're in way smaller groups and they're a lot more scattered, which makes it also hard to centralize and do anything else. Again, really good move on Pharaoh's part, and he acts decisively and quickly. He probably had already thought through contingency plans for what happens if this population, starts to get a little bit unruly. He wouldn't be doing a good job as Pharaoh if he hadn't, if he didn't have contingency plans for controlling the slave population. So he's ready to go with these solutions right away, and right away he goes. So how does this look then in practice? The taskmasters, who are Egyptians, interact with the foremen, who are Israelites, over more Israelites. And that's kind of the chain of command, right? And the taskmasters have the ability to beat the foreman if things aren't getting done, right? Which is meant to motivate the foreman to, motivate the people who work under them and all that. And so you change the standard or keep the standard, same number of bricks. You've got to go all over the place to get the straw. Definitely not possible. It comes time, for the bricks to be counted and the day's tallies to be made or whatever. They come up short, and the taskmasters say to the foreman, "What gives? Not enough bricks. Time for a beating." And as a one-off, that is obviously not pleasant or a great idea. But if you're a foreman, you're also thinking, this is going to happen again every single day, because we can't do this now. This isn't just like bad right now. This is like bad for as far into the future as I can see. This is a real problem. What made this happen again? Oh yeah, it was Moses and Aaron. Those are the ones who should be getting beaten. I didn't do anything wrong. And here I am. This is so not fair, right? And their anger, far from being directed toward the taskmasters, who are actually creating the bad situation, will be directed toward Aaron and Moses. This is not the brightest thing to do, right? Like, it's pointless, but like the foreman here seemed to be operating under the presumption that, Pharaoh just doesn't realize that he has imposed an unjust and an unrealistic expectation. So we'll just go let him know that, Pharaoh, this doesn't work. Like, maybe you could change your mind a little bit and back to the way things were. And then, you wouldn't have to beat us for things that are your fault. That would be a good change that you could make. Certainly that doesn't work with tyrants, deliberately oppressing you. to try to convince them to remove the oppressive measures that they're putting in place. That is a hilariously naive thing to do. So no, that's not going to work. This sort of thing still happens in like not slave situations, but there are absolutely bosses that are like this who will impose fairly unrealistic demands upon their staff and will have no interest in having people point out to them ways in which things are unrealistic or wrong. It might or might not be intentionally oppressive, but it is, things like, you all have to do this or I don't get my bonus. So, or as big of a bonus as I want. So you all need to achieve all these things regardless of whether they're possible. Right? There are still, outside of slavery and a capitalist system, there is still lots of room for oppression by superiors, by people who have power over others. And it still happens a lot. And it's still unreasonable. And it's also usually not fruitful to point that out to the oppressor. Some of the social structures underlying this dynamic have changed, but the rules and operation of oppression really haven't, right? You don't have to have formal slaves to have this kind of oppression. All you have to do is have financial power over somebody, right? As long as it's not that easy to just quit and find another job and you feel like you need the job, and I can't quit because, I'm living paycheck to paycheck and I have no other option. So my boss asks unreasonable things of me. I guess I have to try to do them. And bam, exploitation. Just as surely as if you were a slave and you were being beaten, instead leveraging financial pressure. So this is still a thing that happens. And lest it go without saying, the church is obviously very against that, right? That's against core human dignity, right? To exploit people using financial pressures just as much as it is to exploit people through slavery. So we should not feel like we're so much better than these people and this would never happen in our world, because it does, and it shouldn't. Again, Pharaoh, not arguing in good faith, right? Says, oh, but you all have so much extra time, I noticed. What with all of your coming to me and saying you have time to go off into the wilderness and sacrifice to your God. If you have time to do that, you have time to go find your own straw. It's just simple math. It's basically, adding 30% per day of extra work is the same as taking 3 days off once in terms of workload. That definitely tracks. So if you have all this time to be, thinking about and talking about and asking about sacrificing to your God, I'm sure that you have time to get the straw. So you'll figure it out. It'll be fine. And the beatings will continue until you figure it out. Then they go do exactly what Pharaoh wanted them to do, and more or less exactly the way he wanted them to. They went to Moses and Aaron and they said, this is your fault. And the Lord look upon you and judge, because you have made us offensive in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants and have put a sword in their hands to kill us. The sword was always there, guys. That's the problem, right? You could feel the oppression more lately because you were doing what he wanted you to do. And you tried to exercise any amount of your own autonomy, and the oppression kicked in more strongly. It doesn't mean the sword wasn't there when you felt it less strongly. Your state hasn't actually changed. You just think it has. But of course, that's not how they're seeing it, and that's not how they're supposed to see it. Pharaoh is doing things to generate this kind of reaction, and he is succeeding. So the Israelites tried to take their issue up with Pharaoh, and when that didn't work, instead of continuing to blame Pharaoh for the unjustness of their situation, they are turning on Moses and Aaron. This is the interesting part. As we are passing blame down the chain, what should happen at this point is they come to Moses and he says, tough, the Lord's got it handled. And like stops the escalation of blame. What he does instead is he continues it one more time and says, God, I thought you were going to make things better for this people. You're making it worse, right? Like he takes that same passing of the buck and passes it up to God, who had already said, Pharaoh's going to say no, and I will deliver you. I've got this covered. And Moses, right in the moment, in his first response, doesn't trust that God has it covered, right? He doesn't have the faith yet to push back on the people and say, God's got this, don't worry about it. Instead, he's panicking a little bit, and he's surely getting caught up, right? Because he needs these people to follow him. He feels very tenuous in his situation, right? There's a lot that's going on that's not just Moses doesn't have faith, right? He's getting caught up in his own issues, as we talked about in the intro. But Moses, leading the people in the desert, would never do this, right? Like, he would say probably some not very nice things to anybody complaining and send them packing. And does more or less that on multiple occasions. But he's not there yet, right? And he's not Moses yet, as we know Moses later to be. And you wonder if that's part of the reason that this goes this way, right? Like, if God could have made it just work and chose not to, because he needed Moses and the people to go through this experience as part of getting them to where he's trying to lead them, right? Because God's not trying to just get the people out of Egypt. He's trying to make them his people and lead them into the promised land, not just like Canaan, right? But like heaven. And he needs Moses and preferably the rest of the people to have the appropriate conversion experience and change of mind and heart in order for that to happen. So if here he just delivered the people from Egypt, okay, they're out of Egypt, but what have they gained? They've gained a geographical change, but not a spiritual one at that point. Whereas if Moses has to, and Aaron, to a lesser degree, have to work through the process of going back and forth and managing the people and Pharaoh and all of the plagues and everything that happens. By the time they leave, Moses is a very different person than he is when he starts. And that matters. And that's one of the things God's trying to do. So could God have just gotten the people out right here in the first round? Probably. Could he have in the first couple of rounds of plagues when he instead hardens Pharaoh's heart? Absolutely. He drags this out intentionally. And I think he does it probably primarily for the sake of Moses. And, preferably also, probably also for the sake of any of the people who are paying attention, who have the same conversion opportunity as Moses. But we know Moses really embraces all of what's happening and really, well, we'll see, but really does go through more of Moses's journey toward God happens while they're still stuck in Egypt than everything that happens after they leave, which is just cool to think about. And then he tries to, as they're going through the desert, he tries to show everyone else, not just physically journeying toward the promised land, but he tries to show them that same journey that he had toward God. And he tries to lead the people not just toward a geographical destination, but toward a spiritual one, which he can't do until he's been through it himself. And this needs to take a little while to give him some time to take that journey himself. This has been an overview of Lesson 5 of the Turning to God's Word Bible Study. You shall have no other gods, the book of Exodus. For more information, consult our written study and visit us online at turningtogodsword.com.